In this tutorial, we're going to look at how to reference an external JavaScript file to operate on the elements in your HTML document, and also how to leverage the power of jQuery, which is a popular and powerful JavaScript library. So we'll start by opening the contents of the tutorial 3 folder that you've downloaded already from GitHub in our text editor, in this case Sublime Text 2. And you'll see that there's 3 folders inside: assets, CSS, JS, and an HTML file in the root directory called index. So if we open index, we'll see there's already a link tag which is referencing css/style.css. So if we open the CSS folder, there's a style.css file inside, and if we open that, we'll see this has already been pre-populated for you, and the HTML document is already registering the CSS file. There's also a JS folder with a script.js file inside that has a $document ready function, which we'll come back to in a minute. But that hasn't been referenced anywhere in the page yet, so it's not connected yet to the HTML document. Finally, there's an assets folder, and inside is a file called cat1.jpg and another called cat2.jpg. If you look at the body or content section of the HTML document, you'll see that the structure is first a div with an ID of container that wraps an anchor tag that has a unique ID, and it's the word swap. And there's an image tag that also has a unique ID, cat-image, and a source. It's pulling from assets, this folder here, and it's pulling cat1.jpg. So the first thing we want to do is upload this to our server to see what we're starting with. So we'll use our FTP client, FileZilla, and the WebIS site SFTP preset. And once we're logged in, I'm going to go into the writable directory, and then you'll go into your own personal directory. We'll use Carolina for the purpose of the example. And you're going to want to take the tutorial 3 folder and drag the entire folder up to your server. It might take a second because there's a couple of images to write which are larger than the text files. But once it's up there, you can open it in your browser by going to group and then your group number .webissite.com/yourname/tutorial3. And so we'll see there's a large image on the page and a button on the top left called swap. So if I open Chrome Developer Tools by going to View, Developer, Developer Tools, and we go in the Elements tag, and we open up the body, we'll see here's the container, which is has a width of 100%, a height of 100%, so it's taking the entire page, and the overflow is hidden, meaning that if anything is contained within the container that exceeds the size of the page itself, it will not be rendered, which is why if I put my mouse over the page and I try to scroll, I'll see that there's no possibility for scrolling because nothing can be larger than the page. Next, we'll see there's the anchor tag with the ID of swap button, and if we look here in our CSS, swap button has a position of fixed, which means that it's rendered in a fixed position on the page, and even if we were able to scroll, it wouldn't move. It would stay in that location. And the location is determined here with the top attribute, and it's 100 pixels from the top. So this dimension from between the top of the browser window to swap is 100 pixels, and its left position is also 100 pixels, so it's from the left it's 100 pixels. In Chrome Developer Tools, we can dynamically change this, so if we wanted to change it, say, to 200, we could slide it to the right, and if we wanted to increase top to 200, we would also bring it further down. So now it's 200 pixels from the top and 200 from the left. Next thing to note is that the Z index, or Z index, is 2, which tells you basically the layers on the page. So anything with a Z index less than 2 will be rendered underneath the swap button. And finally, we set the font size to make it larger than the default font size. Next is the image tag, cat-image, and we can see this also has a position of fixed. Its top is 0 and its left is 0, so it's aligned to the very top left of the page. Its width is given 100%, and then the height is given auto. So depending on so basically what that'll do is it'll stretch the image to the full width of the page, and then the height of auto will tell it to maintain the aspect ratio. So if it was a long horizontal image, it would reach across the entire page, but maybe not the full length of the page. If it's a portrait image, a lot of it will be cropped off the bottom of the page because it'll be full width, but the height will be much higher than the visible part of the page. And then finally, the z-index is equal to 1, which means it's going to be behind the swap button, which has a z-index of 2. So if I were to change this to 10, or 20 rather, you'll see the swap button goes away because now it's lower in the z-index than the image itself. If I go back to the anchor tag and change the z-index to 21, now it appears back on top. So this is our starting point. I'm going to close this for a minute. And we'll go back to Sublime Text 2. Because the next thing we want to do is take the JavaScript file script.js and allow the HTML document to recognize it and load it. So we'll put that in the head section of the HTML document, and we'll do it using a script tag. So we'll write script, and the script attribute that references the file is the source attribute, and it's in the folder JS, and the file is called script.js. And script tags need to be closed. So if we save this, go back to FileZilla, open tutorial 3, and upload and overwrite index.html. When we refresh the page, we'll see that swap goes back to where it was originally, but also that nothing else has happened. If we go back into Chrome Developer Tools, and this time we open the console tab, you'll see that there was an error in script.js line 1, which is what's indicated on the right, and it's saying reference error $sign is not defined. If we go back to script.js, $sign is the convention for the jQuery function. The problem here is that this script file has a dependency. It's the jQuery library. And without it, it doesn't know how to handle the $sign function or object. So what we need to do is, in the head section of the HTML document, we need to load a jQuery library. Now, one way of doing this is to go to jQuery.com and downloading your own, uploading it to your server, and then serving it yourself locally. But because jQuery is such a commonly used library, there's a number of content distributed networks or CDNs out there that will serve it for you, and it'll actually be likely just as fast or faster than if you served it yourself. So we're going to do a search for Google jQuery CDN. The first hit will take us to Google hosted libraries. And if you click through to that, you'll see that there's a number of libraries here: AngularJS, jQuery, jQuery UI, MooTools, Prototype, and so on that are so popular on the web that Google will actually host them for you. So we're going to scroll down to jQuery, and you'll see here is a snippet, and this is what you want to insert into your website. And if you actually just take the src or source tag, copy that and paste it into a new browser window, you'll see that all it is that at this URL location is the jQuery.min.js file of version 1.9.0. And so if you change that version to any of the other supported versions, such as 1.7.2, and refresh, you'll see that this is also stored there, but now we're looking at version 1.7.2. So what you want to do is take the entire green part, the entire script tag, opening and close, come back to your website, and we're going to load it into the head section. So we'll save this, re-upload index.html, and you don't have to upload anything to the JS folder because it's referencing a JavaScript file, the jQuery file, that's held on another server, on the Google servers. So if we refresh this again with our console open, we'll see again we have uncaught reference error, $sign is not defined, script.js1. Now, the problem here is that the way that this operates, the way that an HTML document is read, is it's read from top to bottom. So when the browser is parsing this, it'll first load js/script.js, and it'll attempt to run it immediately. It'll then load the jQuery.min.js file that's served by Google. The problem is that we need this file before we have this one. So if we switch the order to put the Google library dependency on top and save and re-upload. Now when we refresh, we'll see we have no errors, and in fact we have the word ready that's been printed out. The reason we have ready is if we go back to script.js, you'll see it's been pre-populated with a console log statement that just says the word ready. Just a really quick note on working with jQuery. What this does, the $ function is the jQuery function. You can also write the word jQuery with a capital Q. And that function is passed a parameter of a selector. So what jQuery does is it encapsulates a series of JavaScript, stock JavaScript commands, and allows you to run all of them in a single function. So, for instance, what we want to do with this quick exercise is take this cat image, and when someone clicks on the swap button, we want to swap out the image of cat1.jpg for cat2. And jQuery is going to allow us to do that in a couple different ways. So the first thing we want to do is write a function that's going to do that swapping for us. So we're going to write function swap. It's going to have no parameters. And this is the function declaration pattern. So you write the word function, then the function name, open bracket and any parameters that need to be sent to the function, close bracket, and then open curly brace declares what we run when the function is called. So what we want to do in this is first we're going to use the jQuery function to select our image. So the jQuery function takes a string as a parameter when you want to use it as a selector, and like in CSS, the way of accessing something with an ID is to use the hash symbol. So we're looking for, if we go back to index.html, we're looking for the image tag with ID of cat image. So I'm going to copy that and paste it into here. And the next thing we'll do is use jQuery dot notation. So when you set up the jQuery function, what this will do is it'll select cat image, you give it a dot, and then you can operate on it. So what we want to do is we want to operate on the attribute, the source attribute. So the jQuery method for that is attr, or attribute. And then the parameters you send that are the attribute you want to operate on, which is src. And then if you give it a second parameter, that will be the new attribute. So in this case, we want it to be assets/cat2.jpg. And we'll use a semicolon to end the line. The next thing we need to do is we need to bind this function to a click event on this anchor tag. So again, we'll use the jQuery $ function to select our anchor tag, which has an ID of swap button. And then we'll use the bind method, and that takes two parameters. The first is the type of event that you want to bind to, and we want to bind to a click event. And then the next parameter is the function you want to bind to that event. So we're going to bind swap, which means now anytime a user clicks on an anchor tag with the ID of swap button, we're going to call the swap function. So if we save this, we'll go back and upload script.js. Now if we close the console and refresh the page, when we click the swap button, you'll see that the cat is swapped out for a second cat image. Good practice when you're doing bindings is to put a console log statement in the swap. And so I'm just going to do that here retroactively, console.log, pass it a string, swap called. If I save that again, upload. Now if I open Developer Tools and go to the console, if I refresh, now when I click the swap button, I should see swap has been called. And if you use the element tag and you inspect the image, you'll see now the source has been changed to cat2.jpg.